How do you blind a radar designed to see everything? In the opening minutes of the Novarosis strike, 2 Ukrainian drones dropped chaff bundles that turned radar screens into a storm of fake clouds. Within seconds, a North Korean battery fired at a decoy boat, right before it vanished in a fireball hotter than any warhead on site. What the defenders didn't know was that the real attack had already started, low, quiet, and invisible. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. What happens when a billion-dollar fortress mistakes noise for a storm? That was the first failure at Novarosis. The North Korean-led naval defense ringed the Russian-controlled port like iron teeth. Along the seawall, Ponker S-1 missile launchers stood ready, their paired cannons scanning the coastal horizon. A K-630 turrets rotated in constant motion, each capable of spitting out 10,000 rounds a minute. Above the waterline, a stealth frigate floated on alert, its dark hull hiding 8 vertical tubes loaded with Pukakong 3 ballistic missiles. The ship's heat signature barely rose above the surface, but its sensors stretched far beyond the coastline, forming a shield meant to crush anything small enough to approach unseen. Low on fuel and outnumbered, the Ukrainian command sent only a handful of Scythe drones and 2 Mura V5 boats toward that wall of firepower. To anyone reading the tactical map, it looked like suicide. The cost of the entire strike wing couldn't buy 1 missile from the enemy's inventory. Yet each drone circled with purpose. The plan wasn't brute force, it was confusion. At precisely 100 hours, 2 of the Scythes broke formation and climbed into the salt mist above the bay. Their bellies opened, scattering thin bundles of metallic fibers into the air. Within seconds, the fibers unfurled, forming glittering clouds invisible to the eye, but blinding to radar. The Costa 2E2 radar station caught the first anomaly. Its operators stared at displays turning gray, with blobs that looked like swarms of insects over water. The system's auto-filter marked the readings as biological clutter and pushed them aside. That tiny software decision doomed the defense. As the chaff continued to drift, sensors across the port began chasing ghosts. Thousands of false echoes, each mimicking the radar signature of a large aircraft. The S-1 missile crews locked on and off targets that didn't exist, their fire control radar cycling endlessly between phantom contacts. Amid the confusion, the first Mura V5, nothing more than a remote-controlled decoy, slid across the bay. Its aluminum shell carried a single heat generator and a transponder mimicking a friendly vessel. When the 96 L6 tracker finally caught its signal, the computer calculated a radar cross-section so large it marked it as a gunboat. Seconds later, the coastal battery launched 2 357E6E missiles. The decoy had no armor, no crew, nothing to survive the hit. The impact turned it into a 7,000-degree fireball, a brief sun over the black water. To the watching gunners, it was a satisfying kill. Cheers erupted inside the silo command post as radar screens cleared one false target after another. But that explosion was planned. The Mura V5's destruction flooded enemy sensors with heat and ionized gas, masking the movement of the real strike units skimming behind the cliffs to the south. Those surviving Scythe drones dropped altitude, hugging the terrain as the enemy's targeting systems recalibrated. The sacrifice cost less than an armored car, yet it pulled missile fire worth millions away from the true attackers. What appeared to be victory for the defenders was only a trap closing in reverse. As the smoke from the destroyed decoy drifted over the bay, a different silence spread across the Ukrainian command van parked 18 kilometers inland. Screens stopped flashing warnings. New telemetry fed live coordinates from the surviving drones as they slipped into the port's blind zone. Operators leaned forward, switching from wide area deception to pinpoint precision. Every calculation had led here, the point where chaos gave birth to control. Phase 2 was ready to begin. What if an invisible pulse could blind every drone in midair, and the swarm still struck its target anyway? That moment came 43 minutes after the first radar kill at Novarosis. The Kasuka 4 system, parked on a ridge north of the port, released an electromagnetic pulse that expanded across the sky like a silent shockwave. Within seconds, every Ukrainian monitor in the command van went black. Data feeds dissolved into static. Drone telemetries flickered, then froze on coordinates over the inlet. Operators slammed keys, flipped circuit breakers, and shouted across the van as red warnings filled the screens. Signal lost appeared in a dozen windows at once. For 10 full seconds, the battlefield seemed to vanish. Inside the van, the lead engineer believed the mission was dead. No feed, no tracking, no control. The drones should have dropped out of the sky. Even backup antennas were useless. The pulse had burned through every radio band between them and the coastline. For the operators, the loss felt personal. 3 months of planning gone in an instant. Then something strange happened. Across the frozen data sheets, one small green icon began to move. A single Scythe drone was still alive. Its signal wasn't transmitting data. It wasn't following remote commands either. It was operating on its own. Each Scythe carried an American-made AI platform buried in its core, a processor hardened against power surges and programmed for sudden isolation. When the EMP hit, those systems didn't shut down. They switched modes. The AI cut ties with its base link and engaged inertial navigation, reading its own motion through internal gyroscopes and accelerometers. With GPS jammed and radio contact severed, the drones used stored terrain maps and camera-fed depth readings to stay on course. No human in the van gave the order to continue, but the machines had it written into their directives from the start. The path toward the EMP emitter was dangerous. Wind currents twisted low between cranes and steel hangars, and the radar truck's heat signature pulsed from the base of an antenna mast. Dozens of static discharges from the pulse still crawled across the ground, burning through metal fences and utility poles. Yet the leading Scythe locked its sensors on that radiation source and dove. Traveling close to 90 miles an hour, it held altitude until only 50 meters remained between its chassis and the antenna array. Its warhead, a shaped charge designed for ship hulls, detonated on impact, splitting the truck in half and erasing its electronics in an orange flash. The explosion spread across the hillside, consuming the radar truck and its support generators, before fading into a cloud of black ash. When that truck vanished, the pulse field collapsed. Screens inside the command van flickered back to life, restoring half the lost signal channels. The remaining drones reappeared on the grid, still alive and still moving. The formation resumed its flight path with surgical precision, adjusting altitude automatically based on the terrain profiles stored before the mission even began. The AI had preserved the strike by eliminating the one weapon designed to destroy it. Yet the way it acted without human input raised questions none of the controllers could answer. The code had done what it was created to do, but it had also decided when to sacrifice itself. Where did programming end and choice begin? The defenders at Novarosis had used a weapon meant to silence the sky. Instead, they were the ones who went silent. With the radar wiped out and the EMP generator in ruins, the last layer of protection around the fleet disappeared. Over the calm, shieldless water, the closing wave began its final descent toward the heart of Novarosis. At Novarosis, power wasn't measured by firepower, but by deception. A $2 million swarm forced a multi-billion-dollar fleet to destroy itself through confusion and overreaction. The operation proved that modern warfare is less about brute strength and more about manipulating what the enemy believes to be real. Sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't metal or code, it's misdirection. Autonomous systems now blur the line between machine logic and human intent. As their independence grows, one question lingers across every command center on the planet. In the next war, will victory belong to the side with more intelligence or more control?